Hi everyone. So the story that I'm going to share is about how my aunts found out and my mother found out that they are actually all half siblings, although they were told that they were full blood. Um, so my mother was born in Georgia, late 1950s. My grandmother was only 16. She was raised in a very Southern Baptist home, so that was a big no-no. She moved here with my mother and supposedly my mother's father, and that would be Grandpa Chuck. And then they had my Aunt Denise and my Aunt Sandy a couple years apart. And apparently they had a very bad home life. My aunts and my mother have always said that it was very abusive, very toxic. They were taken away a few times, so it was kind of a rough time living there. But eventually my Grandpa Chuck and my grandma divorced, and then she met my Papa Pete, who I've known as my grandfather, my whole life. And they had my uncle. So the girls knew that their brother, my uncle, was half, that wasn't, their dad. But when my mom was 18, she decided to move out and confront my grandmother and asked, "Who's my dad? I know Chuck's not my father." And my grandmother decided not to keep it a secret anymore and told the whole family that my mom's father did come to Michigan with her, but they separated shortly after and they never stayed in contact. And that Chuck, my Grandpa Chuck, his only daughter is my Aunt Denise, so the second in the line of siblings. And that they said that Aunt Sandy, the third girl, was my Grandpa Chuck's, but was really someone that my grandmother does not remember. So they all have different fathers, bottom line. And that kind of separated the family. My mom moved out and was living with my dad and started their family life. And then my aunts moved out shortly after, but they were only 16 and 14 when they moved out, so pretty young. And they separated for several years. It wasn't until they were all in their 20s that they reconnected. But it's just interesting to me because you look at them and they're a pretty close-knit family. I mean, now you would have never guessed it. But it was a very traumatizing thing that they all went through, and kind of like a crazy story that we tell when everyone gets old enough now that, yeah, it's kind of a divided family that a lot of us don't know where our bloodlines, start. So although it's a sad story, it's also a very happy story in the end. The second part of the video is about the multi-contextual life cycle framework. And on page 15, Goldrick, Petro, and Carter state that we believe that individual development always takes place in the context of emotional relationship, the most significant of which are family relationships, whether by blood, adoption, marriage, or informal commitment. Families are always embedded in a social and cultural context. So with this, it's impossible for us to understand individuals without assessing their current historical, family, and cultural context, as they are always evolving. So for therapists, I think that just shows that we need to look at the bigger picture. That there's always other factors coming in, whether it's from the past, whether it's from the present, whether it's from direct family members, whether it's from the culture that they grew up in, whether it's from, non-blood relationships. Everything that happened affects who they are, and maybe that's why they're coming in with the trauma or the problems or the struggles that they're having. And so we need to look at the big picture to get to the bottom line of what's really going on. I kind of think with the first statement that I made for that Goldrick, Petro, and Carter said about the most significant of which are family relationships, whether by blood, adoption, marriage, or informal commitment. I kind of think of my mom and the story of my aunts, that they're not all full blood, and that for sure traumatized some of them. But, that's still a emotional relationship, even though they're not full. So, and I think by doing this as a therapist and looking at the bigger picture and all the factors, you kind of show your clients that, you're willing to get to the bottom of whatever is causing them the struggles that they're having.